Sarah Collier didn't plan to text a billionaire. She only wanted her son to stop crying. It was past midnight, the kind of cold, hollow hour where even the city outside seemed to hold its breath. Sarah sat on the floor of her apartment's tiny kitchen, her back against the cabinet, her knees pulled up to her chest. A dusty rose hoodie hung off one shoulder, threadbare at the cuffs, soft from 100 nights exactly like this one. The lights were off, not because she wanted it dark, but because the power company didn't do sympathy extensions. Eli cried from the bedroom. His bottle had been mostly water tonight. Sarah had stretched the last of the formula as far as it could go, and then a little further than that. She tried not to look at the empty can sitting on the counter, pale label facing her like an accusation. She picked up her phone with shaky hands, her thumb hovering over her brother's contact. Ryan had helped before, not happily, but he had. She didn't want to ask again. But tonight wasn't about pride. It was about a baby in a pale, yellow onesie who didn't understand why his stomach hurt. She typed, "Ryan, I'm sorry to bother you again. I need $50 for formula. Eli's almost out. I get paid Friday. I'll pay you back. Please." Her thumb trembled as she hit send. She didn't double-check the number. She didn't even look at the name. She just set the phone down, dropped her forehead to her knees, and waited. 5 minutes later, her phone buzzed. "I think you meant to send that to someone else." Sarah blinked, sat up, grabbed the phone, and stared in horror. One wrong digit. She had texted a stranger. Her stomach dropped, the specific, sickening kind of drop that comes not just from embarrassment, but from the exhaustion of one more thing going wrong in a life where too many things already had. "I'm so sorry," she typed. "Please ignore." Wrong number. She locked the screen, tossed the phone aside, pulled the hoodie tighter, added it to the pile. One more small failure on a night already full of them. Then her phone buzzed again. "Is your baby going to be okay?" Sarah stared at the screen for a long moment. A stranger. A wrong number. For words that had no business being as kind as they were. She almost didn't answer. 40 floors above the city, Cole Whitman read the message twice. He was still in the office. He always was at this hour. Standing at the floor-to-ceiling window in a charcoal gray Henley, sleeves pushed to the elbow. The skyline spread out below him like something that had never once asked his permission to be beautiful. His private phone almost never buzzed. He gave the number to no one. And yet, he read it a third time. "I need $50 for formula. Eli's almost out." He should have ignored it. Most nights he would have. Instead, he typed, "Is your baby going to be okay?" Her reply came fast, apologetic, locked down, the digital equivalent of a door closing. He didn't push. He just stayed in the conversation the way you stay in a room when someone needs you not to leave. He asked one question. She gave half an answer. He asked nothing more. Then he sent $5,000. Her response came 3 seconds later. "This is too much." He typed back, "It's already yours." And then he set the phone down and looked back out at the city and didn't let himself think too hard about why he'd done it. On the kitchen floor across town, Sarah stared at her screen until her eyes burned. She wasn't crying because of the money. She was crying because of how he'd said it, like she was worth it without having to prove it first. Then she noticed something that stopped her cold. He'd called her son Eli. She never told him his name. Sarah didn't sleep. She fed Eli the last scoop of formula she'd been rationing since Tuesday, settled him against her chest until his breathing slowed, and then sat in the dark with her phone and typed the name into the search bar with one hand. Cole Whitman. The results loaded faster than she was ready for. CEO. Helix Core Industries. Net worth, she blinked, $11.8 billion. Former military. Widower. The kind of man that financial journalists called visionary and everyone else called private. There were exactly 3 photos of him online. All serious. All distant. One showed him leaving a Senate subcommittee hearing, jaw set, eyes somewhere past the camera, like the whole room was already behind him. Sarah sat with that for a long time. Then she typed, "Why are you really doing this?" She expected nothing. She expected a pivot, some quiet revelation of what this actually cost. Instead, 20 minutes later, her phone lit up. Because I know what it's like to lose someone you can't save. She read it twice. Set the phone face down on the mattress. Picked it up again. There was no follow-up. No explanation. Just those words, sitting there, not asking for anything back. She didn't know what to do with that. She suspected he didn't either. The boxes arrived the next morning, formula, diapers, clothes, a handwritten note tucked inside. He should have what he needs. Sarah didn't touch them for hours. Eli, bright and unbothered in his pale yellow onesie, reached straight for the nearest box like it had always been coming. It started simply enough. Cole asked what her field was. Sarah told him, biochem research, diagnostics, an internship at a firm that no longer existed. Then, before he could say anything generous she couldn't accept, she listed everything else. She could scrub toilets, make lattes, calculate taxes she couldn't afford to pay. She said it matter-of-factly, the way you do when you've long since stopped being embarrassed by survival. He cut through all of it in one line. Come by Helix Core. 11 a.m. Ask for Dana. No strings. She almost didn't go. She stood in front of her closet for 10 minutes before pulling out the cream blouse she hadn't worn since before Eli was born. It's still buttoned. That felt like enough. She tucked Eli against her chest in his pale yellow onesie and walked into the kind of building she used to interview in, back when she still believed interviews led somewhere. Dana Marsh met her at the elevator. Olive green blazer, warm eyes, a tablet she held like a shield she didn't actually need. She didn't make Sarah explain herself. She simply said, he knows what it feels like to walk in alone. Then she led her down a hallway and unlocked a door Sarah wasn't expecting. A nursery, fully furnished. Crib, soft rugs, blackout curtains. Built before she arrived. Sarah's hand went to her mouth. When Cole walked in minutes later, white dress shirt, no tie, the quiet exhaustion of someone who carries things he doesn't discuss. He sat across from her and slid a folder over, without preamble. She looked at the number on the offer line and forgot, briefly, how to breathe. The first morning, Sarah arrived before anyone else. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. It was just that Eli woke at 5:30 regardless of circumstance. And once she was up, and sitting still had never been something she was good at. She settled him in the nursery. He took to it faster than she did, already treating the plush animals like old friends, and crossed the glass partition to her desk. The office was clean, modest. 2 monitors, a fast connection, access to systems she hadn't touched in over a year. She sat down slowly, the way you approach something you're afraid might not work anymore. It worked. Within an hour her brain had clicked back into the old rhythm, the precise, pattern-hunting frequency she'd spent years building, and one bad year, try and forget. She was already inside the vendor reconciliation files, already flagging payouts that didn't sit right, when she heard the door. Cole, charcoal Henley, sleeves pushed up, the informal version of himself, the one that showed up when he wasn't performing authority. He looked at her screen without asking permission. Does anything feel off? Yes, she said. Start surface level. She looked at him. I don't do surface level. Something shifted in his expression, not surprise, but recognition. Neither do I. He held her gaze for one beat, then walked out. That afternoon, a message arrived through the internal system, private channel, no subject line. If you find something, bring it directly to me. No one else. She found it on Friday afternoon, 40 minutes before she would have packed up and gone home. It wasn't dramatic. It never was with this kind of thing. Just a vendor name that appeared once too often, Trinox Solutions LLC, attached to project codes that didn't match any active division. She ran it against the registry. Nothing. She checked the payment routing. Delaware Holding Company, structured to receive transfers in amounts that sat just below every internal alert threshold. Neat. Deliberate. The kind of invisible that takes planning. She sat back and looked at the ceiling for exactly 3 seconds. Then she started pulling every thread she could find. By the time she was done, it spanned an entire fiscal quarter. Millions, distributed across departments like scattered seeds, each one small enough to ignore, all of them adding up to something that made her stomach tighten. She copied the files, encrypted the folder, and messaged Cole through the private channel. I need 5 minutes. It's important. She handed him the flash drive without preamble. He plugged it in, scrolled in silence. She watched his face the way she'd learned to watch numbers, looking for the thing that didn't fit. What she saw wasn't surprise. It was confirmation, the expression of someone who had suspected something long enough that the proof arriving felt less like a revelation and more like a door finally opening. "Why haven't you gone to the board?" she asked. "Because at least 2 of them are compromised." She held that. "Then why me?" He looked at her steadily. "Because you don't owe anyone here anything. And you don't scare easy." The payments weren't random. That was the first thing Sarah confirmed when she went back in. Every approval, regardless of department, regardless of which login signed off, traced back to the same device ID. Someone hadn't just created ghost transactions. They had borrowed real credentials, real names, real access, and used them like a costume. Clean on the surface. Untouchable, unless you knew exactly what to look for. Sarah knew what to look for. She was still staring at the screen when Cole came in and set a folder on the desk without a word. She opened it. A photograph. Mid-40s. Sharp suit, white shirt, steel gray, not a thread out of place. The kind of face that read as trustworthy because it had been arranged that way over many years of practice. Derek Sloan, CFO. Hired 26 months ago, shortly after the previous compliance director resigned, without public explanation. In the time since, he had quietly restructured internal oversight, consolidated approval chains, and removed 3 cross-check protocols, all under the stated goal of streamlining compliance. Nobody had questioned it. Why would they? It looked like efficiency. "I know it's him," Cole said. "Proving it, that's the hard part." "I'll find the crack," Sarah said. She meant it the way she meant most things, quietly, completely, without drama. That night she lay beside Eli in the dark, watching the pale yellow rise and fall of his chest, slow and certain as a tide. She kept thinking about Cole's face when she'd handed him the drive. Not the relief of someone who'd just learned something. The exhaustion of someone who had known for a long time and had been waiting for proof, for help, for someone willing to look where he couldn't. She understood that kind of waiting. She'd done enough of it herself. The memo went into the system on a Tuesday morning, fake, precise, loaded with exactly the kind of language Derek couldn't afford to ignore. Sarah had helped write it. She knew what bait looked like when it was working. He accessed it within 2 hours. Cole scheduled the meeting for Thursday, casual framing, mid-morning slot, the kind of check-in that wouldn't raise flags. Sarah sat at her desk in her cream blouse with the security feed open on her second monitor, her hands folded in her lap tighter than she intended. She watched Cole enter the conference room first, watched Derek follow 2 minutes later, unhurried, the picture of a man who believed every room already belonged to him. Cole laid it out without theater. The vendor, the shell, the device ID, the pattern. Derek didn't deny it. He didn't flinch. He simply reached into his jacket, white shirt immaculate, not a single crease out of place, and set a flash drive on the table, between them like a card he'd been holding all along. Fabricated emails. Manufactured irregularities. A version of events in which Cole was the one moving money, and Sarah was the outside hire brought in to help him hide it. "You have until Friday," Derek said. "Resign quietly, and she walks away clean. Everyone wins." Cole's jaw tightened. "You underestimate me." Derek smiled, measured, unhurried, smoothed his steel gray lapel with 2 fingers, and left without looking back. Sarah stopped the feed and sat very still in the silence that followed. They were in a different kind of war now. Reeves arrived the next morning with a dark navy jacket, a hard drive, and no interest in small talk. Cole introduced them in 4 words, she found at first, and that was enough. Reeves looked at Sarah the way people look at someone they're deciding whether to trust, then nodded once and opened his laptop. Former FBI. Forensic accounting. The kind of quiet that came from having sat across from people who lied for a living and learned to read every frequency of it. Sarah was moved to the safe house that evening, a clean, spare apartment under a subsidiary name, a portable crib already set up in the corner like someone had thought of Eli before she had. She didn't ask how. She packed light and didn't look back. For 36 hours the three of them worked through encrypted channels, every transfer, every timestamp, every ghost login traced back to its origin. Reeves said little until he said everything. We have enough to not only bury Derek, but pull apart everyone protecting him. The press release went live at 6:43 p.m. Simultaneously, Reeves' team delivered 38 pages of documentation to the state attorney's office. At 8:05 p.m., Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. I underestimated you, Derek said. She didn't hesitate. That's how most women in power get noticed, by becoming inconvenient. She hung up. That night she sat in the safe house with the news playing low on the screen, Eli warm and oblivious beside her in his pale yellow onesie. She waited for the anxiety that usually followed quiet. It didn't come. For the first time in months, there was only calm. She didn't need to check the news. She felt it in the way her phone buzzed continuously from the moment she woke. A different frequency than before, heavier, more real. Derek Sloan. Suspended pending federal investigation. The board voted unanimously before noon. The offer came that afternoon. Director of Internal Audit, full autonomy, her own team. Direct line to the CEO. She accepted it the same way she'd accepted everything that had ever actually mattered. Quietly, completely, without making a show of it. She presented the new compliance framework to the board 3 days later. Cream blouse. Shoulders back. Voice steady. The system she'd built was decentralized, triple audited, and made no exceptions for anyone, including Cole. One board member stopped her in the hallway afterward, a man who had said very little throughout the entire ordeal. You did something rare, he said. You did your job so well it made the rest of us look sloppy. Sarah looked at him evenly. I wasn't trying to look good. I was trying to keep my kids safe. She was still at her desk that evening when Cole appeared in the doorway. White dress shirt open at the collar, the tired version of powerful, the one she'd quietly come to trust most. Let's get out of here, he said. They walked outside into the city without a destination, talking the way people talk when they've stopped performing and started simply being. Somewhere along the way the conversation became something else, warmer, slower, harder to name. Later, alone, Sarah found a message from Cole. A screenshot. The very first text she'd ever sent him. Ryan, I'm sorry to bother you again. He'd titled the file, The Accident That Wasn't. Below it, one more message. I'd like you and Eli in my life permanently. Not just as a team. As mine if you're ready. Sarah smiled. Typed back, ask me again in person.